What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Bass Podcast. I just need to put a disclaimer. This was a complete accident yet again. I forgot my in-ears, so I'm back in the cans.
Yeah, I mean, last time I said I text you to remind you to bring the in-ears. This time, I didn't text you, so I guess it's on me.
It's not. It's 100% on me. But anyways, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great.
Yeah. No complaints. The snow's melted in Kentucky, so that's good.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Yeah. But we have a very, very special guest today.
That's right. Mr.
Philip Conrad, who I've been watching his content for quite some time. I feel like I was a very early subscriber before we were even making this. He's an international touring bassist, teacher, and content creator.
Yeah.
Full-time bass player for Noah Guthrie and Good Trouble. I was first aware of Philip from Red Shoals videos, and eventually he has pivoted to making content for himself. That is fantastic. So if you haven't checked it out, go look for it. But what's up, man?
Hey, thanks, man. What an introduction. Very, very kind of you. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah. Well, first of all, how's it going? How's where you're at? How's life?
It's good. I'm in Atlanta, and yeah, things are good right now.
What's the weather like?
It's actually a beautiful sunny day, crisp winter air, but not too cold.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a good vibe today.
That's where we're at. I think it's like 30s for us. 38.
You guys are in Lexington?
Yeah, we're in Lexington, Kentucky.
Nice.
Yeah, buddy.
Nice.
Let me start this timer. I never did that. Yeah. Anyway, we are we're cranking out extra content this week, which who knows when this will come out, but we've had some fantastic interviews lately.
Cool.
We've had Jason, we've had Alana.
Yeah. Really cool stuff.
And now we have quite the content creator with us. So let's jump in. I don't know. I feel like first things I always associate with you is B-15s. You have a B-15. You love your B-15. Tell me about it. Tell me about what you like about it.
Well, I would rather nothing else be associated with than a B-15 because it's one of my favorite things. And mine, I don't know if you can see it. It's right there. Maybe I'll just roll it out. Stand by.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So this is, I think, I looked up the serial number one time. This is a 69.
Okay.
It's a B-15N. And I love it. I got it from a musician friend of mine here in Atlanta. And he, it was years ago, and it needed a lot of work. I got it. I think I got it for like $500.
Oh my gosh.
It was probably 10 years ago. And then I took it to Acorn Amps, which is a really awesome amp builder here in Atlanta, and he rebuilt it and rebaffled it for me and changed all the tubes and just gave it some love.
That's wonderful.
So I think all in, it was like $1,000 to get this thing, and it's just been like one of those desert island pieces of gear that I use for everything. You know, maybe not everything, but it does sound good on most things, and it's been a good companion. So there she is.
I have one as well, and it's Magnavox, which I think yours Magnavox. It's the silver with the low switch. Do you have the low and high? It does have the
ultra low switch.
Yeah. So I feel like that would mean Magnavox or right before Magnavox. I got a steal on mine and I paid $1,200, but that was like 2 years ago. So you did pretty dang well.
It's a bummer how gear that should be valuable is just getting unattainable for a lot of people, especially old stuff, because it's like they're not making any more of it. And then also the economy is dicey, so it's like just to get your hands on something is really difficult today. Yeah, which is kind of I think it's a bummer, especially for like musicians that are starting now, where it's like there's I think there's kind of gatekeeping with all analog vintage stuff, but it's also not really realistic. It's a privilege to have access to some of it just because of the cost, which is a bummer. So I'm just fortunate. I'm thankful to have this one and to have got it when I did.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool too with some pro audio stuff, at least, the clone market making, like a Warm Audio or even the upper end clones like BAE makes stuff or Heritage Audio or all that are making like really good Neve clones, that kind of thing, where it's like now someone like me has a chance of owning it because that clone market just pushed the original stuff like that much more. Like if you want a Neumann U87 right now, that's like legit. I mean, you could pay $10,000 to $20,000.
Yeah,
I mean that's. Yeah, I mean I love that stuff, and even if I had the money, I don't think I could justify that.
Yeah,
it's a fascinating economy we're in right now.
You know who's killing it right now with that stuff? I think is Universal Audio specific. Well, for everything, but they're starting to get into the guitar amp pedal world.
Yes.
Like the Ruby and the Dream.
Yes.
And they're scary good. And
Yes.
I'm hoping that UA is going to jump in on the bass emulation game. Like if they could make a B15 or SVT pedal, they would knock it out of the park. So the technology is getting scary good.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing. I mean, like, of course, we love the classic original stuff, but I think everybody should be able to access the sounds that we all fell in love with.
Absolutely.
You know, regardless of your tax bracket.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Especially when you talk about like the amps and stuff, and you were saying like people that get into playing, like it's so unattainable. But even for that, like if you're just getting in and you did manage to get your hands on a vintage amp, like the amount of like stress it is to even just maintain those. If they were to see the road, if they were to see the local bar scene or like whatever, like you were doing when you were starting out, like it's just so cool that you've got these like pedals that kind of emulate it in such a good way. It's like you can have that sound and not have to have some crazy amp tech ready to go to fix it whenever Carson takes his SVT out and needs something else again. You know, like it's with these old amps, you're just, it's cool to have it, but it's hard to keep them around.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I a year or so ago, I did a record over in Hamburg, Germany, and there was this really cool studio, Clouds Hill, and it's like fully analog. They got the Neve console, they've got all of the outboard gear, everything, tape machine, like they barely even touch a hard drive, but that requires a full-time tech.
Yep.
That's there all the time. And like just the electrical bill, just to keep the console running is insane. I mean, you can't turn them off. Like if you turn them off, it's really bad for them. So it's like just to own that thing and have it functioning is incredibly expensive, you know? So it's like, it was a privilege to get to use some of this gear, but it's like, it's very unattainable for most musicians unless you have a major record deal, you know? And
I mean, I've heard console electrical bills exceeding $1,000 a month just to keep them on. And nobody talks about downsides of a lot of the analog stuff. That's also like a big console needs a massive racked power supply with fans. And a lot of times that requires a separate room to keep it in because it's so loud that it's hard to like, it's nauseating to do your real work because of that power supply.
Yeah.
With the B15, something I feel like people might not really discuss or know is that really when you're more than 30% into the volume, you're now competing with resonant frequencies in the cab, and the speaker itself might rattle, the wheels might rattle, the top like clamps might rattle. It's like you start fighting the amp itself, the design of the amp itself.
You're right. I've gigged a few times with this amp, like if there was like a small kind of like singer-songwritery gig and it was not too far on the road, I was like, I'll just take the flip top. And it's cool for a while, but then if the drummer starts digging in a little harder on that snare and the guitar player does the thing where they pretend like they're not turning it up and they do turn it up, and then it's like you get to this point where the amp, it sounds perfect, and then you cross a line where it's like, okay, now it sounds too distorted,
it's imploding.
It's imploding. It's rattling. It is like, I mean, those amps are incredible, but they have to be at a specific volume and a specific context. And that's why they're so great in studios. And I'll say too, I did a video about the new SGTDI this year, and
great video.
Thanks, man. And it has two circuits. It has the SVT and the B15. And I'll say, I don't like the SVT side as much, but I think they did a great job with that B15 setting because I put it against my B15 and it sounds really good. And part of what sounds so good about it is there's no rattle. There's none of that stuff. None of those things that you fight.
Yep.
So it was really interesting to hear it. It was like a very high fidelity HD flip top. It had the saturation character without the rattliness, which also can be charming and cool in a mix. You know, I don't want to sterilize it, but I was just like, oh, I think they did a really good job with that B15 circuit on that, which is the same circuit I believe that's in the Venture series.
Cool.
Yeah, this rig over here.
I've been very curious about those.
I just did a video about them, and I'm putting it through the ringer right now, and it's like having a 1200 watt B15 that weighs nothing. So it's pretty cool. I haven't gigged with it yet. I've just been recording it and testing it and stuff, but like it's that same circuit that we like. I believe it's the same circuit that we like in the SGT, but with so much headroom and the cabs are super light. It's like, oh, this is actually a pretty cool option.
Yeah. I've been extra lusting over the Jad Freer. I cannot the Sysma amp. Is that what it is? Sysma.
Yeah,
man. But they're expensive. The Ampeg, the newer Ampeg stuff seems pretty obtainable price wise.
Yeah,
and they've always been.
I appreciate that about Ampeg. It's,
same.
I mean, they have different tiers, obviously. Like, there's some. I'll say another one of their things that I really love is their current V4, the fully tubed V4. It's a vibe.
Yeah.
Rhett has one. Actually, it was funny. A few years ago, Rhett did this concert series live on his YouTube channel called Backstage Live, and Ampeg was a sponsor. So basically, like, Rhett texted me. He was like, "Hey, man, we pick out anything off of Ampeg's website for this series. Like, get what you want, or at least ask for what you want."
Right.
And it was in his parents' basement. So I was like, part of me was like, yeah, I'm going to get like a SVT giant 810. I was like, well, no, actually that probably would be fighting me way too much in this context. Let me go for the V4.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with that amp, and he still has it. And that's one of his primary bass recording sounds is that V4.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really great option.
Yeah. And so again, downsides of analog stuff. I have a Magnavox SVT, which is great, but some people don't realize, especially in a studio setting, you flip on an SVT and there is a massive fan that starts going. It just goes woo, and if you're not in an environment where you can separate the head and the cab, sometimes that fan is loud enough to get on your nerves. If you're the one tracking it, you have to know going into it. But all the new SVT stuff have DI outs on them, which never existed, however many years ago. And you get things like the Rupert Neve DI you can put between the SVT and the cab in a speaker mode, which is awesome. But the V4B, I don't think it uses that same really loud fan. It has the DI on it, and it's low enough wattage that you could use with like a Universal Audio aux box. Because then I was like, man, I'd love to ditch a cab and get one of those aux box things. I think I'm saying it right.
I think you are. But I haven't tried it with the aux.
The V4 or the SVT will blow it up. It can't handle 300 watts.
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but my understanding is like the SVT was a solution for a problem that we don't really have anymore. It's like that it was an arms race in the 70s for volume on stage, where you got these Marshall stacks and you have these giant rock drummers, and PAs hadn't really caught up yet. So it's like you have this giant wall of bass goodness behind you that's so loud. It's so you can hang on the gig. And it's like, I love SVTs as much as the next guy, don't get me wrong, but it's like, it's not always practical. And like you said, I don't think of them as much as a recording specialty as a live specialty for a large venue. Yeah. But that brings up an interesting example. I was talking about that record. I did it in Germany. We did it, I think it was like 12 or 14 songs, and did the whole record with a flip top, except for one song where we went like a little harder and we switched to the SVT.
Nice.
for that attitude.
Yeah.
It does have a really cool attitude. But it's, I don't think its strength is as much recording studio mode as it is live mode, personally.
Yeah, that's what is very fascinating to me, because I prefer the tone of an SVT over a B15, which, you know, the majority of bass guitar recorded amps by far, like not even close, is a B15. I actually really like the sound of an SVT.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, man, how do I make this easier?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good, I mean, I love it too. I think for me, it kind of depends on the context of the song and the arrangement.
100%. Yeah.
But it is a very special thing, the SVT sound. And I think it's hard to capture. I think it's hard to emulate. I think I've been using let me see if I can tilt the camera down without ruining everything. Stand by.
Yeah.
The super vintage Origin Effects, I think, is very good at the SVT sound. I've been using that a lot.
Yeah, I agree. It does a really good job. This is funny. I'm glad we're here. Our most hated video is we're like one of the only negative reviews of that on YouTube.
Yeah. I need to watch it. I haven't seen
it wasn't that negative. It was just like,
not for us. Not what we
like
thought
a
it
tool.
was.
It's a tool for a problem that we don't have. Kind of like you said for the SVT, where I expected to use it like a Sans amp. Like you plug it in, you EQ it how you want, you're blending in amp sound. Whereas it's more like you need to be pretty happy with your sound going into it, or really like the sound of your bass like flat, and then you blend in the amp and EQ. They're kind of tied together. Whereas I'm like, I'd kind of like to EQ my bass and then bring in distortion, so it's more like a flow. But they also did like, there's some insane innovation in that too, where you're like, you have little EQs on your like amp out to your amp with the little bass and like nobody else does that. That is a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
But we're just like, not for me, but that's awesome.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everything's for everybody.
I come from an environment where I was severed from using amps. Growing up, I was always DI and playing in a church.
Yeah, I think that's a story for a lot of folks.
Yeah, so it's like considering an amp as part of my tone had never been an option.
Yeah.
So it seems like that pedal is geared to someone who loves a B15 and is like, I don't want to play without the amp sound, or I don't want to play without this character on top of my bass. Whereas I am so used to, we're just taking a DI. Like, don't mess with it. We're taking a DI. Don't flavor it too much, and EQ it a little bit. So it's like two mindsets.
No, I think you're right. I think for me, I kind of treated it as like an always on subtle saturation, and just kind of dial in the drive and the blend. I don't touch the EQ too much, and it's kind of just something that I have on just to give me a little bit of texture and saturation, and then I'll use other things to add more aggression before it, and kind of just treat it like it is an amp on stage. Like it's like the last thing in my chain is this tube amp, which is not actually a tube amp. That's kind of how I've treated it. It just has like an always on thing. I will say, did you try the black panel, the 64 black panel?
No, we've heard a lot of people say you need to try that, and listening to sound examples, I think I would like that more.
Yeah,
which I didn't expect.
I love them both. And it's not a question of which one do I like more. It's more a question of, do you like a SVT or a Bassman more? Because it does the Bassman thing really well.
Yeah.
I actually I had a thing where my buddy Trigby, who's a great bass player, came over, and I had them both plugged in, and I set them the exact same, all the knobs in the same spot, and I had them just play a groove, and I just unplugged one and plugged the other one in, and they're so different from each other.
Yeah.
And the way they break up is very different from each other. And it's, I really liked it. I think I like that one the most with like a 60s style semi-hollow, sort of like a Guild or like a K or some kind of like hollow or semi-hollow bass, which I think makes sense because it's like kind of a genre appropriate pairing Like having like a 60s bassman with a semi-hollow or a hollow bass. It just sounds really, really nice. So if you're into that kind of like, I think it works really well for like a singer-songwritery, indie, folksy sort of sound where you want that 60s vibe. It's really cool. I would definitely recommend checking it out.
We're pretty entrenched in that, being in Lexington, Kentucky. Like more people are kind of, you know, as the bands get bigger, they're going more bassman, you know, that kind of thing. Less Ampeg. But I will say the amount I like an SVT too when they're pretty clean. Like if you keep an SVT kind of low, it does this interesting hi-fi thing that I really like. And I've never been really an experience where I've wanted to overdrive the front end of an SVT a lot as like my main sound. Plus the old one I have doesn't even have a gain knob on the front. Yeah. You know, it's just volume. But I got to play Red Rocks. And I saw that. Congratulations, man. That's like a bucket list thing. I've never done that. Man, amazing. But I was like so bad, like even if I have to rent the amp myself from a Denver company, I really just want to have an SVT. Like I want to have that feeling behind me because it's such an amazing thing on stage. And so we're the opening band, and so there's 2 acts after us, and we're so like on the front of the stage, you know how you have to do. That I'm just like standing on the lip of the stage, and the amp is like pressed against my back because
so you got one. You got SVT.
I did get it, yeah, and it was amazing. It was just like, I mean, it was the best like 30 minutes of my life, but just like
that's pretty cool.
Having it like just vibrate your entire body. Nobody else heard it. It wasn't mic'd, but it was awesome.
Well, I am a firm believer that I play differently if I have an amp on stage.
Absolutely.
And I also spent a lot of time playing in churches and like DI only, and I recognize that's a workflow that is legitimate, and it's not going to change for a lot of gigs. Like it's not realistic to always have an amp, but I do think having air. There's something about air moving, and there's something about vibrating the floor that is like it just gives you authority. Like you just feel like you have like power, and it changes the way that I play, for better or for worse.
Yeah,
but it's definitely a vibe.
Have you ever
That's so
seen
cool that you gotta do that, man?
I know, gosh, I'm still on cloud 9. Have you ever played with a butt kicker? Have you heard of those?
Yeah. I just once. Okay. It was a long time ago, but I was like, it was one that you stand. I think they have one drummers can sit on, and I think there's one that you can stand on.
We would. And it was we would build platforms at the church I was at, and it simulated that. It was better. It was substantially better than nothing.
It was good feedback.
It was good.
It's good feedback.
Yeah. That's cool.
But it's a good, you know, it really goes with your point where like I play better when I feel it. A drummer does play better when he feels the bass, in my opinion, you know, and that's why you get these interesting kind of workarounds where it's like a little vibration platform thing under your feet that feels like you're feeling the amp for someone who hasn't experienced a butt kicker. But that's not something you can bring with you. I guess there was that thing, the backbeat that people were doing, but it's a lot of hassle.
I think it looks kind of funny, honestly.
It does look kind of funny. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think I would ever buy something like that and take it with me to gigs.
Right.
As cool as
a lot of cables.
It is as an option. Say again.
It's a lot of cables.
Yeah. It reminds me though. I mentioned earlier that backstage live thing at Rhett's in the basement with the V4, and I remember there was a moment when we had like a band talk with our engineer Andy, and he was like basically like, "Hey, I'm fighting the bass in this room.
Right.
What do you guys think about DI?" And I was like, "Let's try it. Let's try it with a DI." And we did like a rehearsal with the DI, and the mix did sound more controlled.
Sure.
But as a band, I removed myself from the vote. And as the band, the other guys in the band all said, the music feels better with the amp on. And we think we should abandon the control and sterilization of the music in favor of the vibe, which will make the music better.
Fascinating.
And that was what we decided to do.
Yeah.
And the engineer Andy was like awesome about it. He's like, "Yep, that's at the end of the day what is The most important thing is how the band plays. I thought that was just like a cool diplomatic like moment of like, okay, there's one side which is like control and sterilization and like being able to just manage this thing with complete access, and then on the other there's this like wild musical organism that you can't control, and it's like, which way do you go? I always like to lean towards the chaotic moment, but I recognize it's not always possible for every situation.
Yeah, I think there's a major caveat there too, that like your band is really good. You know, if you just show up and like flip on all the amps and there's no order and no understanding of how to play well and play as a band well, that it's all just I'm trying not to get the explicit tag on our podcast right now, but it's all just a mess, we'll say. Like you guys are well rehearsed and know where to fit in, and so you can use that nuance to your advantage.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I will say too, I've run my fair share of front of house, and I've been on the other side of it too, where you have someone that is too loud on stage. And I think there is definitely a ceiling of how much vibe you can lean into, because at a certain point, at the end of the day, I've had situations where I'm chasing the vocal, just trying to get the vocal on top of the band. And then just to do that, you're either fighting feedback or it's actually like uncomfortably loud in a space. So it's like, I think there needs to be a mutual respect and communication between the band and the engineer based off of the space and the nature of the gig. Where everyone, I think there's a way everybody can find a happy compromise.
Is your band running in-ears when you're touring these days?
Not anymore. We did for a while, but we've just switched to wedges and amps recently.
Cool.
So,
I was curious, do you set your amp differently when you're using in-ears versus when you're using wedges?
That's an interesting question. I haven't consciously set it differently. Regardless, I usually just have my amp essentially as a stage monitor for myself.
Right.
I'm sending DI front house. I'm usually not micing up cabs.
Right.
So it's like I basically will EQ my amp to what I feel like the stage needs, and then I will turn it up to the point where I feel like it's at the appropriate volume where I can feel it and it blends, and then I'm kind of hands off. And I do that either way. So yeah, I don't know if I consciously change depending on ears or wedges.
Feel like,
but I think I lean more on the amp a lot more when we're wedges.
Certainly, when I get in those situations where like everything is just too loud, but I have the luxury of having in-ears, which is pretty rare. I turn my amp way down and I like juice the low end so that it's like a butt kicker where I can just feel it in my legs. And then I just know they're getting a DI signal and it's so low that like not even the front row could probably hear my amp. And so I just move on. That's
a pretty clever solution. That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know. First world problems, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We've hit amps.
Yeah.
Effectively.
I know it's funny because it's funny to see like this triangle of people where it's like, dude, everything we do is like you're swimming in such a world of gear that we're well aware of our options. So I think my question is, when you're going out and you've got a gig, let's say it's not in town, let's say you're going on the road, what's actually going with you? Like, let's say you're doing like a mid-size 500 to 1,000 cap room, like what's going with you amp and board wise?
And bass.
Yeah, and bass too. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll start with bass. I pretty much just take this.
I've seen that on your Instagram a bunch, and I love it.
Yeah, and so for those that are listening and aren't watching, it's this is a Mustang. This is the JMJ Signature series that I've modded a little bit. And the reason I take this is I had a really bad hand injury several years ago, which kind of changed the way, kind of changed my life and changed how I play music. But basically, like, the longer I play, the more uncomfortable or painful it becomes for me. And I started experimenting with short scales probably 6 or 7 years ago when I was doing a lot of these 5-hour wedding gigs where I was like, man, this is rough. Anything I can do to make my day a little better.
Right.
So at the time I was just playing my P bass or a jazz bass, which I still love to play. And I switched to the Mustang, the 30-inch scale, and it really helped me just be more comfortable. But then I sort of fell in love with the sonic attributes of it as well. I really do like the way it sounds. So it's kind of become my daily driver for travel gigs. And then also there is the added convenience factor of I can fit this in a guitar mono case. So for flying, it's so much easier because a lot of, as you guys know, I'm sure, a lot of planes, you can get a guitar in the overhead bin, but you maybe can't get a full-scale bass. So it's and then just throwing it in a car or a cab or whatever is just a little easier. Or traveling internationally, it's a whole lot easier to take a guitar bag than a bass bag, which isn't a reason to choose this instrument, but it is an added bonus. So
it might be a reason to travel with it.
100%.
Yeah.
In your words, what do you describe the difference between like a P bass full scale and a short scale Mustang? Like how do you feel or perceive that tonal difference?
I actually did I made a video recently about the Bass 6, and I did
great video.
Thank you. I'm just making the videos I want to watch. So when other people like them, it means a lot to me because I'm just having fun with this. But I was like, what is actually the difference between these instruments sonically? And I recorded just me playing an E string, one note on my jazz bass, my P bass, the Bass 6, and the Mustang. So Leo's 4 designs, if I'm correct. I think those were the 4 that he designed before he left the Fender company. And what I found was the P bass is just so rock solid in the low mids, and the overtones, they don't fluctuate. They're just, you can see it in isotope. You can see just
right.
You can see just like bright orange stripes that just don't dissipate. So I think the P bass is a self-mixing instrument because it is that the sonic information is right where you want a bass to sit in a mix. A P bass naturally wants to give you that information. And I think that's probably why the P bass is, I would go out on a limb and say the most recorded bass in history. Because it is a self-mixing instrument. The difference, I think the Mustang is also a self-mixing instrument. But if you look at the same spectrum analysis on the same note with a Mustang, there's this transient spike across the entire frequency spectrum where like when you strike the note, it's like, here's the note, here's the pitch, like all the way up and down the sound spectrum. And then it almost looks like you slammed a multi-band compressor where it took all that information and slammed it down and it only left the fundamental. So it's like the Mustang's cool because it's like, it cuts so well, and then it immediately removes itself from the mix and leaves you just the bass business of here's the root note. So it's also a self-mixing instrument in a different way. And to fight the harshness of that transient, I like to use flats or half rounds to kind of tame because it's clacky. It can be clacky and also very bassy. So I've found a lot of success with flats on a Mustang because it kind of tames that harsh attack, but then you still have that really juicy bass business that just, it has a lot of sustain too. So they're both great. I think I would choose one or the other kind of based off of the song and the tone of the other. Like if you were in the studio and it's like, I'm going to pick up the P bass or the Mustang, I would probably make that decision based off of the other instruments and their tones. Because I like to try and mix with my gear, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And you're hired to.
Yeah, I think so. I think
if you're trusted by your producer, as you should be.
Yeah, I was actually listening to you guys, and I think it was you, Carson, maybe, that said it's like a lot of producers want to hire producers that play bass, not bass players. I thought that was cool. I think that's true. Like I think session musicians should have producer mindsets, try and give them because I find the best producers that I've worked with, they don't micromanage. They just put good people in a room and then just pull the faders up, you know,
100%.
and then it's more like, okay, the vision of the song needs to go more like here or here. It's not like you pick up this other instrument. It's like, I think good producers in general, I think they trust the musicians, if the musicians have earned the trust to self monitor and make some of their own choices.
Yeah, I've had that's been my best studio experiences where I know like, and also some anxiety comes out of it for me when you're with someone, a producer who's empowering you instead of, you're just okay with you that you're there. They need to get something out of you, but you're not there because like, oh, you fit the specific aesthetic. And that's also, it makes a place for a lot of different bass players where you don't feel like you need to get your feelings hurt if like this producer grabs this bass player for this project, because you know you're trusting that person to specifically make an arsenal around this aesthetic, and that these are some of the best people that are going to fit together and be able to do it fast and creative. And, you know. Yeah,
I think so. I think some musicians have a mindset of like, I want to do everything. And I want gear that can do one piece of gear that can do everything. And I want to be able to do anything and everything as a bass player, as a technician.
Yeah.
And then I think there's other folks that are like, I want to do this one thing really well. I used to try and do everything and have like active pickups and not that there's anything wrong with that. But then I've sort of had an ethos shift of like, okay, I'm going to lean into what I enjoy and I'm going to choose gear that kind of informs me. I like gear that kind of pushes back or sends me in a direction, and then I'll choose different gear based off the vibe of the song. And then the questions that I usually ask in the studio, I used to ask too many questions, or ask the engineer like, hey man, how do you think about my tone? Or hey, is this working? And now I'm like, I don't ask questions. I just do what I think needs to happen. If there's a problem, I'll hear about it. But the questions I will ask are usually to the artist, and I'll be like, hey, what's this song mean to you? And what were you feeling when you wrote it?
Yeah.
And then my job is an interpreter at that point to say, okay, now I know the vision of the song, the feeling of the song, the sentiment of the song. What can I do as a bass player that will help take their black and white vision of the song and paint it into color? And then it's like, that's like a privilege to get to help them in that way. 100%. And that's our responsibility as musicians, I think.
A method actor of sorts.
I think so.
Yeah. Back to your Mustang comment too about the like the overtone fundamentals. I recently got a Gibson Thunderbird that I'm, in love with.
Yeah, that's
pretty fun. It's really cool. It's, a lot of people don't like the body shape. You're certainly fighting with certain aspects of the instrument, but I think of it kind of like you were saying, or you hear a lot of people say like, oh, I love a P bass with a real chunky neck because it makes me play simple, or it makes me play lyrical. I just, because it's not always my main instrument, I'm like, I grab this and I play a certain way.
Yeah.
But what is very interesting about those pickups that I never expected was if you roll off the bridge pickup, there is almost zero non-fundamental overtone in that pickup at all. And I figured it out because I have this little line that I like hit a harmonic when I play it, like the 5th fret of the upper 2 strings. If I do that on the front pickup, it is almost inaudible.
Yeah.
And I've never had that happen to an instrument before. But then I put the back pickup in a little bit, and that harmonic comes right out. It's fascinating, kind of the shifts you can get, and in maybe instruments you don't expect, where if you're trusted enough to bring your arsenal instead of like a producer that's like, show up with your P bass, don't say anything kind of thing. I mean, those exist, and that's fine. But if you're able to make the sonic decision of, oh, this bass, my bass line is more inspired if I grab a jazz bass for this, or if I grab a Mustang for this, or whatever, you need to know your instruments well enough to know which tones you can get out of what, and just be trusted to do that. And if you can't do that, you probably do need some steering. It's not like we're all right all the time. But you're really onto something. I think I heard Sean Hurley say it one time in some random video where he's just like, if you're doing something wrong, you will know it. Like they will come and tell you immediately. And if you're not being told anything, you're actually right where you want to be.
Yep.
You're like right at that sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because like a lot of the session work that I have done, a lot of it will live track the rhythm section together, where it's like drums and bass, or maybe drums, bass, and keys, or drum, bass, keys, and rhythm guitar. And it's like in those moments, I've found in general so much more focus from the producer and the artist is on the drum parts.
Absolutely.
Where it's like, oh, I wanted to feel more like this. And they're just, drums are by nature, they're so often the energy of a song. And there's very specific audible things that drummers do that totally change the feeling of a song. So I've kind of find myself mostly just sitting back, listening really intently to those conversations, and then just take my bass part and just kind of mold it to match what the drummer is being told to do. And then usually the conversations, I'm not always included in the conversations. I'm just like actively adapting to the drum instructions, if that makes sense.
Yep. I love those environments. And too, when you get in a good rhythm with a drummer, you're cutting, you're going at a moderately slow pace and still cutting 4 songs a day. Yeah. Like when you get that synergy with someone and a producer, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're rounding the bases, but hey, let's get back to board stuff. We haven't really touched on a lot of like we kind of saw what was on your board right now, but kind of run me through a couple things. Are you playing with any like preamps that you're loving right now? Drives, yada yada.
Yeah. So we talked about the bass rig.
Yeah,
I've been using that for about a year. I've also used the 64 black panel as well.
Right.
Kind of on a gig by gig basis. I have been using the Stomp recently, and that's been new for me. I haven't been a multi-effects guy very much. I'm still kind of like experimenting with it. But I got the EMR and Allison presets, and that was
cool,
dude. They're so good.
Worth looking at.
If you have a Stomp, you should absolutely check out the Ian Martin Allison presets. He has 3 packs, and I bought one of them. And I was just blown away. And it was also cool to like help me. In a Stomp, you can see the routing, so I can see what he did.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And it's been helpful even just for that, just to see, okay, here's somebody who's mastered this piece of gear.
Yeah.
What are they thinking about? So anyway, that was kind of what helped open my eyes to it. And then I've been using it a lot also for guitar stuff, like recording guitar parts, which I'm an amateur at, but I do for stuff I'm working on. It's a very powerful piece of gear.
Yeah.
And
Nick uses one.
I do.
You like it?
I do. I use it for all my like fly guitar stuff that I do. If I'm ever flying, I put that thing in my little like carry-on or whatever, and I've got the expression extension to where I can get 2 extra switches. Dude, I mean it is so powerful so quickly. And that one's got 3 in, 3 out. I mean, it's an interface too for those at home that like record on the road or whatever. Like, you're so right. It's so powerful. So much you can do with it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was starting my professional career, I just didn't trust multi-effects and digital stuff. I was just like, it was kind of like, no, if you're legit, you're all analog. But I'm like, I think the Stomp has kind of opened my eyes to what the technology can do. Yeah. Now I think you still need to have, I think why Ian sounds so good with them is because he's mastered the analog stuff, and you still have to know how to dial it in.
Yeah.
So like, I think it's not like a one size fits all solution, but it's so versatile with what it can do, which is cool. And then I've been using this fuzz pedal recently, the Albatross.
Nice.
Albatross.
Can you hear this? I might see if I can let you hear it. Can you hear bass? Let me know.
Oh yeah. Oh, that sounds awesome.
So that's just the bass rig with this. I got some foam in here. All right, so here's this fuzz pedal. I'm gonna click it on. Let me turn it down a hair so I'm not peeking. I really like this fuzz. It's a little company in Hungary that hand makes these. I'm peeking my mic.
Oh, I can hear it now. Yeah. Nice. It's like a low mid fuzz.
Yeah, it's got a blend on it too, which is nice. So it's got a lot of sass to it if you want.
Yeah.
Carson's the same way.
What I like about it is it's not like the fuzziest fuzz. It's not like going off the rails.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like if I'm playing like a song and the guitar player kicks on some heavier drive, it just gives me that little bit of grit where I can just sit in the mix a little bit.
I agree.
So anyway, that's been a cool pedal I've been messing around with a lot recently, is this Albatross by Kazlader.
Nice.
Cool little company.
There's something to that though, because like even if it's just for me, sometimes that like adding some kind of drive in a moment, you're like, this might not even be really coming through the PA in the way that I think it is, but it's helping me get there where I need to be to back this guitarist ripping a solo or like whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Like I would say like 90% of the time I'm out playing, it's me, a guitar player, and a drummer. Like maybe a little help from the, singer, front person, whatever, but it's usually an acoustic if it is. So I feel like having some kind of just little bit of sparkle, nothing crazy, just something to feel like you're really just next level. I mean, in a lot of senses, it is going to come through, but I mean, half the time if I'm playing in a bar or something, it's like, I don't know what's coming through at all. So I can at least control what I'm doing at the very least. So that's cool.
Absolutely.
I think that has a great spot.
It's like that tone. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I took the foam out and I grabbed a pick, so maybe you can hear it a little better. So it's like not the most offensive fuzz, but it's just like it's got a cool vibe.
Yeah,
and it just cuts really well. So
I think that's what I like about the Jad Freer Capo. Because we both went out and bought one of those.
We did.
It's just like the saturation in it is really smooth, and that's what I want, because I'm not someone who reaches for an overdrive, or like I've never really reached for that kind of sound, but I've found the ones I'm drawn to are smooth and they don't scoop. There's a time and a place for a scoopy distortion or like a dark glass type sound, but it's not usually in what I'm getting hired in.
Yeah, I played the Capo for the first time a few weeks ago. I did a video about it with my friend Trigvi, who owns one, and I was so impressed, man. That's a great piece of gear, and it has a lot of options, like having multiple routing, multiple DI outs, affected and unaffected, and different saturation. It's a really powerful little pedal. I'll probably get one at some point. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it, but I was like, man, this is really good. They're doing some good work over there.
Yeah, they're cool. It is kind of interesting that we've entered into the $500-ish bass preamp pedal thing. The Origin's about there, the Capo's there, it's kind of, I don't know, I don't have like a big opinion on it, but it's kind of interesting to see that premium pedal spot opening up.
Yeah.
Where it used to be like a $200 Sans amp or $100.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's like when I started, my first like big boy direct box was the Ready, and that was like, that was like
great.
I love them.
Yeah,
it was like $800 or $900,
a lot.
And
of
then
money.
there was like the Evil Twin was like I think $2,000, and then the Noble I think now is like what is it, $1,200 or $1,400? And there's like
if you're lucky,
I think it's like 14, and then like a $500 rush fee if you want it in.
Yeah,
your
and
lifetime.
It's like months of waiting.
No, the rush is still like 20 weeks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is cool. I'm not saying it shouldn't cost that.
Yeah, sure. Great.
But I think it's like, to your point, I think it's cool that there are accessible quality slamming DIs in that $500 range, where there hadn't always been that. And there's some really good options based entirely off of what you're looking for. but I agree, man. The capo, the super vintage stuff, the SGT DI I do think is cool,
Yeah,
especially on that B15 setting.
I was really
think that's
impressed
even a
with
little
that.
cheaper. Yeah, I think it's like cheaper than the other two.
I've never had either of these in my hand, but the SGT is way more something I would go out and buy than the one before it, the SGR DI. I think it was called
the
something
Scrambler.
like that.
Yeah. I had both, and the SGT blew the Scrambler out of the water.
Yep,
nice
by far.
Yep.
So yes, I agree with you, but I think it's cool. I think I have a hard time spending more than $1,000 on a DI, and I'm a professional bass player, or at least have been a good bit of my music career, and it's like
you are. Yeah.
I mean, I do multiple things and doing YouTube now too, but like it's. I have a hard time justifying that amount of money on a DI, but it's like, okay, cool. $500 range. Yeah. You can get something slamming. And I did a video comparing. I want to do a follow-up to that DI video.
Fantastic video, by the way. And like everyone listening, especially we have a lot more audio people than YouTube people, like go listen to that specific DI comparison video. It's one of the best DI comparisons I've seen, because you do the psychology aspect of it, where you're going around and asking your friends what they also think of the bass tone in the mix and comparing prices. And
thanks, man. And doing it blind too, where I basically I took I think it was like a $30 DI I got off of Amazon, and I borrowed a Noble, and I got the Ready, and I got like several things in the ecosystem of DI world, and just let people listen to it, not knowing what they were, and pick out their favorites. And I will say, stand by. Among friends and YouTube commenters, one of the favorites consistently was this guy.
Yep.
Which is, for those listening, it's the green radial JDI basic DI with a passive bass, I should say. I had a passive P bass going into a passive direct box. A lot of people think that's illegal. It's not. It sounds great. And a lot of people chose that as their favorite in the blind test, which is $200 versus, $1,400. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying there's a lot of diminishing returns of cost with this stuff. I mean, to be fair, the Noble is a preamp too, and it's tubes, and it's doing different things. But in its basic form, you can get a great little direct box that's going to sound good. Now, your gain has to come from somewhere if you're going with passive.
Right.
Like, what are you putting into this, and where's it going? But in terms of just the function of a DI, I think people forget about some of these like tested time, some true tested, time-tested DIs like this. These like $200 DIs can be great.
We talk a lot about the Rupert Neve DI. That's my pick usually. If now it does something to bass tone, you either like it or not. It is super pristine. It sounds ultra clear, ultra whatever. It's not the same as like, it's certainly not neutral.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the transformer, which is doing the work.
Absolutely.
There's actually a cool trick a friend of mine, Robbie, told me years ago, and I've used this sometimes. With this DI, it has a Jensen transformer in it, which is a very high quality transformer.
Yeah. Jensen.
And when you hit a transformer really hard, they can saturate and give their own layer of saturation to your signal. So one thing that I'll do with the flip top, this is a fun trick, and this is credit to my buddy Robbie who taught me this. On the back of the flip top, on mine at least, there's the external speaker.
Oh, there's like an extension cab out or something.
Yeah, there's multiple outs. There's a speaker cable out. There's an extension speaker 8-ohm out, and then there's an external amp out. And I don't fully know all of the impedances of these, so don't blow up your amp. But with this specific one, you can send a signal out of this. It's a very hot signal that this transformer can handle. And basically I'll use this as like a preamp pedal and slam this DI, which will saturate, so you get multiple layers of saturation, and that's kind of a cool sound too. That's a fun trick you can do with really high quality direct boxes with good transformers.
I'm gonna go
Nice.
do that. I didn't even think about that.
Now, disclaimer: you gotta know what you're doing, and you have to be careful. Please don't destroy anything.
Oh, absolutely.
Or any flip tops.
Yeah.
But there are cool sounds to be found when you do some unconventional things like that.
Yeah,
Nice.
the RNDI does have a speaker switch where it's expecting a speaker type load.
Yep.
So man, I'm gonna go do that like tomorrow because I was just thinking about like man, the B15s also have a 3-pin XLR like proprietary connector that is a pain. Like if that connector goes down, that's you're not gonna find that backstage somewhere. It's
Yeah, you're right.
hardwired, all that kind of stuff. So I was just
This
being
one-
like, man, I'd love to have a regular speaker cable.
This one, for whatever reason, it has it has 1/4 inch.
Oh, that's
speaker
awesome.
cable. Yeah,
You're
yeah. I don't know
fortunate.
when they switched.
Are
But
you
yeah.
sure it wasn't modded?
I don't think so, man. Here, let me show you.
Oh gosh, yeah. Sorry.
I think this is all the original outs. Like, I don't know if you can see that. It's like labeled right next to the output jacks, and then on the speaker, it's the same thing. It's kind of a weird shape where it's like you can't have the big speaker cables with the large metal part. It has to be like a true, like something that looks like an instrument cable, like a small one to fit in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's the original.
Man, mine has this like XLR
I know what you're
looking
talking about.
bah, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Oh.
not fun.
By the way, at my local music shop, 10 minutes from me, there is an amazing flip top, and it's been there on consignment for like 6 months. And someone needs to go buy it. It needs a good home. So if there's anybody that is looking for amazing 60s flip top, it's at Earth Shaking Music in Atlanta. You should go get it.
Hey, random B15 fact also.
The lore.
Does yours I leave mine flipped up, which I know is maybe you shouldn't do because the tubes are exposed. It doesn't actually matter, but it smells like burnt hair. Like it has they make this horrible smell when the dust is on top of the tube and then the tube heats
And
up.
it heats up. Yeah.
Yeah, so like just know if you take that thing around, there is a smell. Like they know you're there and you're playing.
Got to smell the groove, man.
Exactly. Like I open up an ISO booth of my amp's been in there and it's just like, oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
The waft.
That smell.
Dude, yeah. Well, dude, this has been fantastic. I love getting in the weeds on this stuff. We'll kind of land the plane here a little bit, but we always do love any recommendations. It can be like something you're just like looking at, pedals, music, movies.
Music, art, movies, like what
Whatever.
inspires you lately?
Yeah, just recs. We love a good rec.
Ah.
What
are you into?
Well, I'll tell you what I've been listening to recently.
Love
No,
it.
it's nothing groundbreaking that you probably hadn't heard of before. I'm on I listen to a lot of Willie Nelson right now and a lot of CCR.
Nice.
I've also been listening to a lot of like ambient Japanese music, which is kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a lot of the pedals and things that I'm into. I don't know.
Dude, I love all
think,
that. Oh, Willie's a fun one to get into because just when you think you know it, you're like, oh, he's also got 80 other records I've never even heard of. Like
And
his
they're all
catalog's so
slapping.
dense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful.
So our band, Good Trouble, we did a handful of dates opening up for him this
Nice.
past year.
Very nice.
And he's like one of my favorite artists. Like I love Willie. And
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember how old he had just turned. It was 90 something.
Mhm.
He's like, I just turned 90 something and I just also released my 90 somethingth album. Like I was like, oh my gosh. He's been
Dude,
doing
working.
this for so
Oh my
long.
gosh.
But yeah, the last night of the little tour, he invited us out on stage to sing the gospel with him. So like
Nice. Yeah.
that was like one of my like
Wow.
greatest moments of. It's funny because also the same month, my wife and I were like doing gardening and stuff, and we won Yard of the Month for our neighborhood. And
All
like
right.
I was like, September, I've peaked. was on stage with Willie Nelson, and we got Yard of the Month. I'm done.
I feel that, man.
But yeah,
That's hilarious.
He was awesome, man. And his whole team, like all the guys on the road with him, his crew and his band. It's like they're all been out on the road with him for like 40 years. They're like a family. And I was just like, man,
Beautiful.
Those guys are really, really class act, really great people.
Man, that is cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for hanging out with us. Always honored to see you peeking our stuff every now and then, and huge fan of you. So thanks again.
Thanks, man. I'm a fan of you guys. Thanks for your support, and yeah, I'm just keep doing what you're doing. We need more stuff like this podcast. So I'm just happy to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
All right, y'all. See you next time.